You're watching Around the World, our top global stories. We begin with America's President Joe Biden, who, after his historic visit to Ukraine's capital Kiev, hit back at Putin's annual address to the Russian parliament, which followed his visit to Kiev. This even as Putin raised the specter of nuclear war by suspending participation in the last surviving nuclear pact with the US and said that the West is attacking Russia's economy with sanctions. Biden was in Poland for a conference of NATO allies where he gave a speech to a large gathering from the gardens of Warsaw's royal castle. Biden said that the US and its allies will not tire of supporting Ukraine.
It wasn't just Ukraine being tested, the whole world. 1 year into this war, Putin no longer doubts the strength of our coalition, but he still doubts our conviction. He doubts our staying power. He doubts our continued support for Ukraine. He doubts whether NATO can remain unified. But there should be no doubt. Our support for Ukraine will not waver.
Now, before that speech, Biden also held bilateral talks with his Polish counterpart, President Andrzej Duda, reaffirming America's dedication to European security. He also slated to meet Duda again along with leaders of the Bucharest Nine, a group of the easternmost members of the NATO military alliance. Joe Biden even made room in his speech to reach out to the Russian citizens, suggesting that this war was never a necessity but is certainly a tragedy.
So tonight, I speak once more to the people of Russia. The United States and the nations of Europe do not seek to control or destroy Russia. The West was not plotting to attack Russia, as Putin said today. And millions of Russian citizens who only want to live in peace with their neighbors are not the enemy.
Russia's President Vladimir Putin, during his annual State of the Union address to both houses of the Russian parliament, attacked the West for wanting to destabilize Russian society. He accused Western powers of waging an attack on Russia's economy with sanctions, but declared that they hadn't achieved anything and will not achieve anything.
The West deployed not only military, information, but also an economic front against us, but achieved and will achieve nothing nowhere. Moreover, the initiators of sanctions punish themselves, have provoked the rise in prices, job losses, business closures, energy crisis in their own countries.
Putin also stressed that Russia should not put guns before butter, but at the same time raised anxiety around the possibility of a nuclear war. Putin declared that Moscow is suspending its participation in the New START treaty, which is the last remaining nuclear arms control pact with the US.
They want to inflict a strategic defeat on us and try to get to our nuclear facilities. In this regard, I am forced to announce today that Russia is suspending its participation in the Strategic Offensive Arms Treaty. I repeat, we are not withdrawing from the pact. No, we are suspending our participation.
The Russian parliament has taken up the matter for discussion today, even as Putin said that Russia should stand ready to resume nuclear weapons tests if the US does so. A move that would end a global ban on nuclear weapons tests in place since Cold War times. On the other hand, the head of the Ukrainian president's office, Andrei Yermak, spoke to India's NSA, Ajit Doval, seeking India's support at the United Nations for a peace plan put forward by Ukraine. This is the second time that Yermak has dialed Doval this year. But even as political and diplomatic outreach continues, the war has thousands of people dead already, devastated Ukraine's infrastructure and wreaked havoc on global economy. Putin in his speech suggested that the war is not against the Ukrainian people who have become hostages of the Kiev regime and its Western masters, but the latest visuals does tell a different story. Russian rockets destroying residential houses, artillery targeting hospitals, forcing staff to flee, and regular shelling leaving dead bodies on the streets. Up next, Africa's most populous country and its biggest economy, Nigeria, is going to polls this week amidst a worsening economic crisis. It's perhaps the only country in the world to go to a crucial election at a time when it battles myriad economic and security problems, including fuel and cash shortage, high inflation, and rising terror as well. And even as the outgoing president, Muhammadu Buhari, makes way after an unsuccessful 8-year stint, Nigerians across the country wait in long queues outside ATMs as the savings of millions remain trapped in banks. In a country reliant on cash, there aren't enough new banknotes ahead of the crucial presidential election. The shortage of cash means people are struggling for even basics like food and medicine. Nigerians are now hoping that a change in guard will fix the challenges for them.
Before this crisis, the monetary policy crisis, it was going to be more like a carnival, very much large enthusiasm, big voter turnout perhaps, and maybe less stress on voters. But now everything is now a little bit more complicated by inefficiently managed monetary policy by the central bank, the governors, the president, and of course, the ruling party.
Now, in such a critical situation, 18 candidates are in the fray campaigning for presidency. Opinion polls show that only 3 candidates have a realistic chance of winning the election. A candidate from one of the 2 main parties is likely to be the next president of Nigeria. To secure the top spot, a candidate has to get more than a quarter of the ballots cast in at least 2/3 of Nigeria's states. If none manage this, then a second round runoff between the top 2 candidates will take place within 21 days. But, however, whoever wins the elections, the road ahead will not be easy. Rather, it will prove to be a crown of thorns, as the cliche goes, and here's why. The country is facing a two-way crisis, economic and security. In order to bring down the levels of corruption and move towards a cashless economy, the Nigerian government implemented demonetization. In a country with only 60% of households having access to a bank account, a scarcity of fresh notes has resulted in an acute cash shortage. On the other hand, the country is experiencing an increase in kidnapping for ransom cases. Besides, it's also battling militant Islamist groups in parts of the north. Away from that, civil rights leader Malcolm X was assassinated 58 years ago. The African-American Muslim leader Malik El Shabazz, popularly known as Malcolm X, his family has now decided to sue the FBI and the CIA and the NYPD, or the New York Police Department, for his death, and that too for $100 million. 58 years after the brutal assassination, there are still no answers to the question, who killed Malcolm X? And now, on his 58th death anniversary, Malcolm X's 2 daughters, Ilyasa Shabazz and Kubila Shabazz, announced their legal plan to sue America's top agencies at a news conference at the same place where Malcolm X was fatally shot by 3 men between the crowd that gathered to hear him address the Organization of Afro-American Unity on the 21st of February, 1965. The former ballroom in Upper Manhattan that's now become a memorial for Malcolm X.
The truth about the circumstances leading to the death of our father is important not only to his family, but to many followers, many admirers, many who look to him for guidance, for love. And it is our hope that litigation of this case will finally provide some unanswered questions. We want justice served for our father.
2 of 3 men convicted of shooting Malcolm X were exonerated in the year 2021. The lawyer who's representing the Shabazz family has alleged that powerful figures in the American government have conspired to kill the Afro-American leader.
Nobody can imagine what they've had to endure. And so for this great injustice, we will be filing a wrongful death lawsuit against these governmental entities for $100 million on behalf of his daughters that are coming forward.
And now finally, we take you to Venice, Venice, the floating city considered by many as one of the most beautiful cities in the world. A unique place where there are no cars, buses, or even bikes. The main mode of transport is walking or taking boats of different shapes and sizes. Venice is the city of canals, but unfortunately those canals are experiencing unusually low tides and floating on shallow waters. Venice, where flooding is normally the primary concern, is now facing unusually low tides that are making it impossible for gondolas, water taxis and water ambulances to navigate some of its famous canals. A new lowest level has been recorded when the water reached 66 centimeters or more than 2 feet below the average lagoon level. Canals in Venice are running dry, and Venice's traditional sailors, known as gondolieri, and public transport experienced major disruption as they had to change routes to avoid shallow waters. The low water levels are being blamed on a combination of factors like dry weather, a full moon, and tidal changes. Weeks of dry winter weather have raised concerns that Italy could face another drought after last summer's emergency. The Alps have received less than half of their normal snowfall, and the Po, Italy's longest river, which runs from the Alps in the northwest to the Adriatic Sea, has over 60% less water than normal at this time of the year. And that's all we have time for on this edition of Around the World. Thank you so much for watching. Keep it with News 9+.